Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today we're returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons. And as always, I'll take a few moments to speak about each one, about what makes it good, bad, or indifferent. So let's go on ahead and get started and see what we get today. So for our first roll, we got a Juggernaut's auto grenade launcher with plus 50% limb damage and plus 1 perception. So the Juggernaut's effect is kind of the opposite of the Bloodied effect. You get damage bonus for having higher health instead of lower health, up to a maximum, I believe it's 25% at maximum health, which is really not that much. It doesn't cost you a whole lot if you're a full health build. You know, you're probably trying to keep your hit points at full anyway if you're full health, then that's a good thing. But also, it's kind of difficult to keep your health at full, 100% full all the time. You know, even just a few rads can knock you off of that and reduce the damage output from the Juggernaut's effect, which is a bit of a bummer, really. It's a good legendary effect in concept, but they really should have made the damage a little bit higher, and then it could scale down and you would still get decent bonuses even as you started taking a little bit of damage. I think it would work much better that way and be a lot more desirable that way. The second effect, the plus 50% limb damage, that is really one of my least favorite second stars. It's just not that useful. If you really want to cripple things, you're better off running the perks that give you the chance to cripple things than you are with trying to use this legendary effect. And even if you are trying to use this legendary effect, this is probably not the best weapon for it, although you might get a little bit of extra benefit from it because of the splash damage. But normally you would want that effect for maximum value on a low damage, high fire rate weapon, so that it basically cripples things quicker, so that they are less likely to reach you. So yeah, not the greatest second star. The plus 1 perception is not bad. I don't think anybody's going to complain about getting a plus 1 to really any of their specials, as a matter of fact. But perception is kind of unexciting on this one, unless you're using it in VATS. But it's worth keeping in mind that if you're using a launcher weapon like this in VATS, then you do run the risk of having your projectile just kind of disappear into nothingness if you miss and not get the splash explosion damage from it. So, you know, it's not necessarily something you shouldn't do, but it's something to be aware of that could happen when you make your choice whether to do so or not. So if myself, I probably wouldn't use this in VATS a whole lot, and so the plus 1 perception with its primary benefit being additional VATS accuracy, I probably wouldn't get a ton of benefit out of that. So this one's more or less a dud, kind of mediocre dud, but mostly a dud. Let's see what else we can get. Next we've got a Ghoulslayer's short hunting rifle with bashing damage increased by 50% and faster movement speed while aiming. So the Ghoulslayer's effect is one of the less effective, or less useful generally speaking, of the Slayer's effects, just because ghouls are typically squishy enough that even without a legendary weapon, you can usually put them down pretty quickly with a half-decent build anyway. So carrying around a weapon specifically to make ghouls easier to kill typically doesn't make a whole lot of sense, unless maybe you're spending a lot of time farming nuke zones where you run into the bloaters or things like that. Or, you know, I could maybe see it for Radiation Rumble or something like that, but this is definitely not the kind of weapon you're going to want to be running in Radiation Rumbles. So, yeah. The second star, the bashing damage increased by 50%, that is just a bad second star in pretty much every single case except for the minigun, and only then if you are putting the Shredder mod on it and using it as a melee weapon. In that one particular case, it's actually rather good, but in pretty much every other case, it is just junk. So, yeah, this isn't a minigun, so we're going to move on. The faster movement speed while aiming, it does what it says on the box if you don't already have the Speed Demon mutation, which I think that most high-level players probably will, just because it's fun to run faster, and there's not really a huge drawback to that mutation. I believe that's the one that makes your food and water meters deplete a little bit more quickly, but, you know, for most high-level players, keeping yourselves fed and hydrated is not a big deal, and even if it is, unlike the way it used to be, character's not going to die from it ever. So, yeah, not really a great third star. If you don't have the Speed Demon, mutation, then you probably will get some benefit out of it. I just don't think that there's a lot of players running around the battlefield holding the aim button. I think the typical strategy is stop, aim, fire, release aim, move to a new position, repeat. So, yeah, pretty much another dud here. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Grommands Ultrasight Gatling Laser with plus 50% limb damage and plus 1 agility. So the Grommands effect is, on armor it's a very good effect because it's percentage damage reduction instead of damage resistance or energy resistance. But on weapons, I guess it's the Overeater's effect, but it's comparable to Grommands, so I always think of them as the same effect. But, you know, on weapons, the Grommands effect, it's a lot less exciting because it's 12% bonus for having a maxed out hunger meter and 12% for having a maxed out thirst meter, which gives you a maximum bonus of 24% damage, which it's not exciting. And you're also likely going to be running a lot of times with lower than that bonus, just because no matter how diligent you are about keeping yourself hydrated and fed, you're probably going to have times when your meters are not at 100% full. You can, of course, use perfect bubblegum or other things to help avoid that, but that can get expensive pretty quickly, so I don't think a lot of players are going to be doing a lot of that just to get the most out of a Grommands effect. The Grommands effect is kind of interesting because it could be useful for a lower to mid-level player who is a full health build, or maybe even not a full health build, but who's wanting to make sure they're getting all of their bonuses from food and water all the time, so they're not really giving much up. If they don't have anything better, I could see them appreciating this effect, but overall it's not that exciting. The plus 50% limb damage, again, it's not exciting, although this really is the kind of weapon that you would get a little bit more use out of it than a lot of other weapons, just because it's a very high fire rate weapon with a relatively low base damage, so it can definitely help keep enemies from getting to you because you cripple their legs or whatever. So it's not terrible, but at the same time, I'd rather see something much more useful there. The plus 1 agility, again, I don't think anybody's going to complain about getting plus 1 to really any of their specials, but at the same time, it's not really doing a whole lot. It's giving you a little bit of extra stealth, which if you're using a weapon like this is probably not doing a whole lot for you, and giving you a little bit of extra AP, which is nice for being able to sprint and such, but the amount that it gives you is not very much, so yeah, pretty much another dud. Let's go on ahead and see what else we can get. And here we've got a Berserker's 50 cal machine gun with bullets exploding for area damage and 25% less VATS AP cost. So it's actually kind of unfortunate that that first star is Berserkers instead of, say, Bloodied or Anti-Armor or something like that, because this weapon it's a heavy gun, and heavy guns are not really ever going to be the best weapons for VATS. You know, there's a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking. However, as far as the automatic heavy guns go, this is one of the better options if you do want to use a heavy gun in VATS, and I've actually made some pretty good use occasionally with a 50 cal that I have in VATS. So having that 25% less VATS AP cost on it would actually be very good because you're going to be able to use it in VATS more frequently, or longer rather, not so much more frequently, before you run out of your action points and have to switch to hip firing or aiming down the sights. Unfortunately, the Berserker's effect, it definitely is not as bad as it used to be because you're not getting the same debuff that you used to get when you had high damage resistance, but it's still just not that good because there is not a whole lot of support for the Berserker's build like there is for the Bloodied build, where there's all kinds of perks and mutations and whatever that help you stay alive and just thrive as a Bloodied build, where there's really nothing like that for the Berserker's build, which is kind of unfortunate. It would actually be nice if there were things like that for it, so that there would be a little bit more diversity in the desirability of effects. But unfortunately, this is the way it is at the moment. Maybe someday they'll add something, one can hope, but in this case, that first star is definitely a dud. The second star, bullets exploding for area damage, that is one of the best second stars on legendary weapons in pretty much any situation. It's just free extra damage, and if you run the Demolition Expert perk, you're getting a little bit of extra damage on top of that. So overall, this would be very good. If you are a Berserker's build, then this is potentially a very good weapon for you, but I don't think there's a lot of Berserkers running around. So let's go on ahead and move on to the next one here. And here we've got a Mutants Black Powder Rifle with plus 50% limb damage and faster movement speed while aiming. So the Mutants effect got a little bit of a buff to where it is at least kind of comparable to the other weaker legendary effects as far as the first stars go, because if you have up to 5 mutations, which I feel like most late game players probably will unless you're running like a role-playing build or a challenge build or something like that, because you're typically going to want marsupial, speed demon, probably either herbivore or carnivore, whichever you prefer, and then probably 2 or 3 at least other mutations that benefit your build particularly well. So getting to 5 mutations is really not that big a deal. You're probably going to have them anyway, so you're not really giving anything up to get that plus 25% damage. It's a maximum of 5 mutations for 5% per mutation for 25% potential bonus damage. So that's good. Unfortunately, it's just 25% is not that exciting when you compare it to junkies or aristocrats giving plus 50%. Bloodied, I believe it's 80% at 20% health. Things like that. So it's not bad. It's just kind of unexciting. The plus 50% limb damage, I've talked about that a couple times already on this video, so I'm not going to dwell on that other than to say that this is definitely not the kind of weapon that you would want it on because it's slow firing and heavy hitting, so it's kind of the opposite there. The faster movement speed while aiming, once again, you know, it does what it says on the box if you don't have the speed, the speed demon mutation, but I think most people do, and even if you don't, it's probably still not doing a whole lot for you. So this one is definitely a dud. Let's see if we can get maybe at least one good one today. Okay, this one's at least interesting. We've got a Vampire Short Radium Rifle with plus 50% VATS hit chance and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So the Vampire's effect is actually one of my favorite effects in the game, and it is most useful on weapons that either have a very high fire rate, such as pretty much all the automatic weapons, or weapons like the shotgun where you fire multiple pellets or whatever per shot. Because each time one of those pellets hit, or each time one of your shots from an automatic weapon hits, it is going to trigger the Vampire's effect and give you a little bit of healing. So the more hits you can get, the more healing you can get from it, which can really go a long way towards keeping yourself alive in difficult situations. I tend to favor Vampire's weapons on my commandos in daily ops, pretty much both the uplink and decryption, as well as not mattering what mutations they have, except for the invisible mutation. That one I break out the Tesla. But other than that, I love the Vampire's effect. It's not the greatest on slow firing, heavy hitting weapons because the amount of health that you gain is not dependent on the damage that you do per shot like I think it should be. It's based just on a constant, so you know your automatic weapon is going to get the same amount of healing from one shot as your black powder rifle is. So that's unfortunate. But in this case, the radium rifle can definitely be made automatic, and that's how I would typically run it. You know, if you can actually unlock the mods for the radium rifle, because that is quite a challenge. But, anyway, the plus 50% VATS hit chance is, again, one of my favorite second stars. Or, one of my favorite second stars. Vampire is one of my favorite first stars, so that's why I find this one very interesting. I like it because I'm a very heavy VATS user, and it basically does do extra damage for you because my philosophy is that if you want to maximize your damage output, one of the first things that you want to do is make sure that you're hitting your target every time. And this will help you do that, and in fact, it will also make it very easy for you to target the weak points on your enemies to get that extra damage that way. And then on top of that, it also gives you a little bit of extra effective range on the weapon beyond what it shows on the weapon card, just because it will help offset some of the range penalty or the accuracy penalty due to range beyond that. You will still see the damage drop off beyond that, which is 50% for most weapons, but shotguns I believe is 90%. So something to be aware of, but sometimes it's still worth being able to get that 50% damage as it is for most weapons beyond that range. So that's a nice thing. So overall, I like that second star very much. The third star is kind of the dud of the three. Plus 250 damage resistance while reloading is not bad. I mean, getting some extra protection while you're reloading and potentially vulnerable because of it is nothing to complain about, but at the same time, if you've got some decent armor in the 300 to 400 damage resistance range, then you've already got pretty solid protection, and the benefit you get from this is going to be much less than it would be if your armor was much less. So that actually kind of makes me think that that effect might go kind of interesting on a Berserker's weapon, but that's kind of a different topic. Because it would only activate theoretically while you were reloading. But unfortunately, this effect also only affects damage resistance. It does not affect energy resistance. So, you know, if your enemies are wielding energy weapons or whatever, then you're not getting any extra protection. So, kind of a dud third star, but the first and second star are very good on this weapon, so I like that one. We got at least one half-decent one today. Let's see what else we can get. And I shouldn't have said anything, because here we've got a Berserker's submachine gun with 25% faster fire rate, and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So, we talked about the Berserker's effect before. Pretty much everything I said there applies here. The 25% faster fire rate is actually one of the best second stars, at least for fully automatic weapons, because it really does increase your damage per second. You can just unload your magazine much, much faster and get the damage in much, much quicker. It does not increase your damage per shot, but it does increase your damage per second significantly. So that's a great thing, because really damage per second is overall more important than damage per shot for effectively bringing things down. That's something it took me a while to learn. I used to love my hunting rifles and things like that until I learned better. But yeah, so not that hunting rifles and such aren't worthless or anything, but if you really want to bring like a big boss or something like that down quickly, you're much better off with something with high DPS than high damage per second than high damage per shot. If you can get both on a weapon, then even better. And then the third star, having a chance to generate a stealth field with every hit, it's interesting, because this is a weapon that you could use in stealth, and it could help you stay in stealth if you're having difficulty with that, although I think you're better off either running unyielding armor to get some bonuses to your agility if you are bloodied build, or using chameleon armor to make yourself invisible if you are a full health build, if you're having trouble staying in stealth. But, you know, I'm not saying that this couldn't be useful, and I don't know, I think it's kind of more of a, I don't want to say meme effect, but I just don't think it's going to be as useful as the reliability of having those effects on your armor. So overall, this one, it's not the worst thing ever because of the second star, but it's still pretty on the low end of mediocre. Let's go on ahead and see what else we can get here. And here we've got a Nocturnal short combat rifle with replenishing action points with each kill and 90% reduced weight. So the Nocturnal effect, kind of like the Berserker's effect, is not as bad as it used to be because they removed the debuff during the day for the weapon. So you're just getting a weapon that is essentially non-legendary, at least as far as the first star is concerned, during the day. And then you get half-decent bonuses at night. So if you are the kind of player who will remember to switch weapons based on in-game day and night, then you might actually appreciate the Nocturnal effect. I'm definitely not that kind of player, so I really don't appreciate that effect that much. Although I do believe that if they added a few like legendary perks that made it so, like a legendary perk that made it where it was always night for you or something like that, then you could actually have an entire Nocturnal build come about from that. But that's just a thought. Anyway, the replenishing action points with each kill, that is an excellent effect there, because it just keeps you killing things in VATs, which allows you to keep targeting those weak points, as well as getting those VATs critical hits in there. So overall, that's a very good second star. Not the best, but very good. And then the 90% reduced weight, that's kind of kind of worthless, not completely worthless by any means, but I don't really like it on rifles or pistols because they typically have so many mod slots that by the time you mod it out, you're losing most of the benefit from that third star because the mods that you apply to a weapon do not benefit from the 90% reduced weight effect. So overall, I find that typically my 90% reduced weight rifles, once I've modded them out, typically weigh right around half the weight of my non-90% reduced weight rifles of the same type. So it's not nothing, but I'd much rather have a more useful third star there. Although, since this one is going back to Murmur at some point, having it weigh only 90%, or having it weigh only a pound, that actually is good because it'll fit in my stash box, and I can sit there until I don't have anything better to script for it. So, alright, we got 2 more tries here. Let's see if we can get something good. And here we've got a Suppressor Subnosed 44 pistol with plus 50% VATS hit chance and 25% less VATS AP cost. So it's kind of unfortunate that the first star was the Suppressor's effect because the second and the third stars synergize very well and are both very good. The Suppressor's effect is not bad, it's just that I don't see where there's a lot of utility for it in the game as it stands right this second. You could definitely see some benefit from reducing the damage output of your enemies in, say, the Decryption Daily Ops, but in most other situations, I just don't see where the Suppressor's effect is any better than just putting the enemy down quickly and getting a damaging effect like Bloodied, Anti-Armor, Aristocrats, Junkies, or whatever to get some extra damage and put them down quicker. Maybe at some point in the future, they'll put some enemies where that will be more useful. I kind of hope so, but as it stands right now, I just don't think it's that useful. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, I talked about that before. It's especially good on this weapon because if you're going to be running a pistol, especially one of the gunslinger pistols that cannot be made automatic, then you are probably going to want to be using VATS to get some extra damage in by targeting the weak points and getting some VATS critical hits. So having that plus 50% VATS hit chance on this weapon is very good. And then the 25% less VATS AP cost, again, synergizes very well with that second star and is very good on this weapon for the same reason that second star is good on this weapon. So if that first star was better, I would definitely classify this one much better. I don't know that the 44 pistol is all that exciting, but as far as 44 pistols go, it would be pretty good if it had a better first star. So we got one more pull here. Let's see what we can get. And here we've got a 2-shot submachine gun with bolts exploding for area damage and VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So we actually got an interesting one here. The 2-shot effect I'm not normally a fan of because, for one thing, it divides your damage up into 2 different shots. It adds 25% damage to the 25% base damage of the weapon to your weapon, and then it divides all of the damage of the weapon, modified damage, up between 2 bullets, each one getting 62.5 or whatever percent there of the damage, which wouldn't be a bad thing, except that each one of those 2 shots has to penetrate the target's armor individually, and the way the calculations work, higher damaging shots penetrate armor better, so by reducing the damage, they're actually getting through the armor less effectively than they are by leaving it as a single shot. So that's not good. And then on top of that, it also significantly reduces the accuracy of the weapon. So with all of those effects, I really just don't like the 2-shot in general, but it does pair very well with explosive weapons because you get, from what it seems like, extra explosive damage when you're using the explosive effect with a 2-shot weapon. So because of that, this one is kind of interesting. And the VATS critical meter filling 15% faster, well, this is definitely the kind of weapon you could use primarily or almost exclusively in VATS, depending on your build and how much AP you have, and your personal preference, of course. So if you were using it in VATS heavily, though, then getting some extra criticals off of that 3rd star is definitely a good thing and going to increase your damage output. So overall, this one is actually, I won't say it's a god roll by any means, but it's definitely solid. So we got a couple of decent ones this week, which makes me kind of happy, although we did get a ton of duds as well. But, you know, that's to be expected when you go and see Murmur here. But anyway, and Please remember, if you enjoyed my content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost you any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.